Welcome back to the channel, folks, and back to Telltale's The Walking Dead. If you caught my video on Season 2, you'll remember that despite the original Walking Dead being one of my favorite games of all time, I never bothered checking out the later seasons. Not really sure why, probably just too busy not enjoying my 20s, or playing Overwatch. Let's go with that. Even though I knew a few things about what happens down the line, I was still excited to finally dive into Season 2. Unfortunately, that excitement didn't last, and I didn't walk away with the best impression by the end. That's not to say I completely hated it. I had some interesting ideas, but it just fell painfully short compared to the emotional highs of the first season. I wrapped up the video hoping the writers would take the lessons from Season 2's missteps and avoid making the same mistakes in future installments. And that brings us to today's topic, the third season of Telltale's The Walking Dead, A New Frontier. Unlike Season 2, I didn't know a single thing about the third season of the series before I played it. I was intrigued when I found out the lead this time wasn't Clementine, but a new character, Javi Garcia, a former star baseball player who ruined his career by betting on his own games. Javi has to pull his life together after the zombie apocalypse shatters society, stepping up to protect and care for his brother's family. We got ourselves a fresh story that isn't held back by the baggage from the first two seasons, and could do its own thing. I started the game in pretty high spirits, but by the time I finished, I was only left with one overwhelming feeling: apathy. Normally, I try to keep my intros neutral so my opinion doesn't affect the rest of the video too much, but to be honest, A New Frontier just didn't do much for me. It didn't leave a bad impression. It didn't really leave any impression at all. I felt like I was just going through the motions during my 7-hour playthrough. So let's break it down and figure out what the hell went wrong. Let's start with a quick recap of Season 2. The game opens with Clementine reuniting with Krista and Omid, the three of them managing to stick together for a few months, until tragedy strikes. Omid is accidentally killed by a scavenger during a botched robbery, shattering the little bit of peace they've found. The story then jumps ahead 2 years. Clementine and Krista are still together, struggling to survive as they make their way toward a survivor camp in Wellington, Ohio. But after an ambush by bandits, the two are separated, with Krista's fate left uncertain, though the game heavily hints that she didn't survive. Clementine doesn't stay on her own for long. After a rocky first encounter, she joins a new group of survivors led by a chill dude named Luke. Things aren't exactly smooth sailing with the new crew though. They're on the run from Carver, the ruthless leader of a large survivor camp they escaped from. While fleeing from him, the group takes refuge at a ski resort where Clementine reunites with Kenny, a member of her original group who was thought to have died back in Season 1. Their reunion is bittersweet. Kenny isn't the same man Clementine once knew. He's now far more abrasive, a control freak whose sanity unravels as the game progresses. Clem's new group eventually gets captured by Carver, and we learn that Carver was specifically after one person, Rebecca, who is several months pregnant. Carver believes he's the father of her child and not her husband Alvin, after a sexual encounter between them that may or may not have been consensual. After killing Carver and escaping his compound, the group is slowly whittled down. By the end, only Clem, Kenny, new survivor Jane, and Rebecca's newborn son AJ remain. The season reaches its climax when Jane goads Kenny into a brutal fight, leaving Clem with a heartbreaking choice: let one kill the other and stay with the survivor, or strike out on her own, taking baby AJ with her. Overall, I didn't really enjoy the season. The story felt directionless. Clementine often seemed like a side character despite being the lead, and the confrontation with Kenny felt extremely forced, as if his arc from Season 1 was just being recycled. But even worse. That, and it felt like my choices barely mattered, as even major things like preventing a character's death didn't accomplish much, as they'd stop being important to the story and do absolutely nothing until they ended up dying anyways. As I'm about to explain, A New Frontier manages to fix some of the mistakes from Season 2, but it also introduces new problems.
Hey. It's time. Get over here.
Alright, I'll start packing up.
Now, Javi, you need to hurry. Look, I'm not giving you shit, okay? You weren't here when Dad was sick, okay? I get it, but you need to fucking be here when he goes.
I know. Alright, I'm still on my way.
A New Frontier takes us back to the early days of the zombie outbreak, with our protagonist Javi desperately trying to make it home before his father dies. After ditching his car due to gridlock traffic and sprinting to his family's house, Javi finds that he's missed his chance. His older brother, David, offers no sympathy. He explodes at Javi for not already being there like the rest of the family. In his anger, David punches his brother and recounts their father's final moments in painful detail.
Everyone's here. They've been here for days, and where the fuck were you?
We're there, all around him. People who love him all around him. And he's scared. I'm seeing the panic in his eyes, and he's searching the room. ¿Dónde está Javier? ¿Dónde está mi hijo? I'm there, right beside him, holding his hand. Like a good son. And he doesn't even see me. He doesn't even see me because he's looking for you.
Man, if I had a nickel every time Alex Hernandez voiced an army veteran with anger issues in 2016, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. David's son Gabe interrupts before things can escalate further. Once Gabe is back inside, David cools down and offers Javi a beer. He doesn't actually apologize for sucker punching him, but he does tell Javi that he loves him. Which is something, I guess. As they settle down, David admits he was jealous of Javi's baseball career and the life he led. While he sympathizes with how Javi lost it all, David sees it as an opportunity for Javi to finally get his act together, to grow up and be there for the family. After David's wife Kate offers her condolences, Javi tries to comfort his grieving mother, but like David, she lashes out, hitting him and scolding him for not being here. I like this opening. It effectively sets up the season's theme of family, lays the groundwork for Javi's character arc of self-improvement for the sake of others, and introduces the tension between him and David, which becomes a central focus in the second half of the season. If only the rest of the season's writing did a good job exploring and capitalizing on these ideas. As the adults discuss funeral plans for Javi's father, David's daughter, Mariana, mentions she's getting water for her grandfather, revealing to the rest of the family her grandpa's awake and moving again. Uh-oh. They discover that Mr. Garcia is indeed among the living again. Except not really, as he's been resurrected as a flesh-eating walker. He'll suddenly attack his brother Hector, biting his wrist before turning on his wife and tearing a chunk out of her cheek. David and Javi desperately try to restrain him, oblivious to what he's become. When he overpowers them, Javi is forced to put his father down. With no time to process what the hell just happened, the group quickly shifts focus to getting Miss Garcia to the hospital. Taking separate cars, David leaves with his mother while Javi takes Uncle Hector, David's wife, and the kids. The brothers promise to meet at the hospital as the scene fades to black, and the episode truly begins.
Tell me when it reaches the campfire.
I don't think I've seen this many. It's definitely growing.
Yeah, not a great sign.
Fast forward 4 or 5 years, Javi has continued to care for his brother's family and has been using the family van as shelter. The group having left their former campsite, Javi chats with Kate while Gabe and Mariana catch some Z's. Kate worries about constantly being on the move and how they haven't had a chance to stop for a bit due to a large walker herd nearby. While the kids nap, she decides to de-stress by lighting up a joint. Nothing like a hit of some good ganja to make you forget about the world ending. Kate is struggling with being a single mother, partially because David is gone, but also because she's the kids' stepmother and not their biological mother. She admits to Javi she wasn't keen to find out David had kids when they dated, and after he proposed, she was adamant she wasn't going to change her habits either. She admits that part of her has changed to be a little more responsible, and she does love her kids. Kate's just been struggling lately, as Gabe has become an insufferable little shit constantly fighting her now that he's a teenager. Javi tries reassuring her. Gabe is just going through a phase, and will hopefully grow out of it soon.
He's a teenager. Puberty. Hormones. Oh yeah, the second you start getting boners, the whole world starts to get dark.
What are you talking about? Sounds delightful compared to dealing with bloody underwear. Christ. I need to get laid.
While it's initially played off as a joke, it becomes obvious as the story goes on that romantic feelings have developed between Javi and Kate during their years surviving together. And as you progress the season, it'll be left to you whether or not Javi reciprocates those feelings. Honestly, I think it would have been better if the two were already a couple after the time skip, since the writing seems to push the player in that direction no matter what. Also, if the player doesn't have Javi pursue Kate, it ends up making the central conflict of the season make little sense. More on that later. After the kids get woken up by the smell of weed, and Gabe criticizes Kate for doing drugs, Javi avoids some potential family drama by pulling over so they can stretch their legs and scavenge for supplies. It doesn't stop Gabe from being a moody little bitch though, as the kid ignores Javi and Kate to go do his own thing. Looking around online, Gabe doesn't have many fans, and I'll be honest, I don't really like the kid all that much either. I get what the writers were going for with Gabe at first. He's struggling to adjust to their new way of life, especially without his father around, who is probably dead. When you speak to him in the junkyard, Gabe admits he misses being around other people, and just hates being cooped up in the van. But his attitude feels more appropriate for someone 5 months into the apocalypse, not 5 years. The game doesn't really dive into what happened during the time skip, so we're left to assume Javi's group has only been on the road with each other this entire time. Due to that, it's hard to sympathize with Gabe feeling isolated, when this has been the way of the world for years and because his sister is perfectly fine. To the game's credit, Gabe isn't completely unlikable, and gets a tiny bit better. Also, Kate tends to escalate the situation, and Javi isn't as strict as David would be, so they're not really making things better. Oh, and I guess I should talk about Mariana too. She likes candy bars, loves listening to her Walkman, and isn't insufferable like her brother. I'd say more, but honestly, there's just not much going on with her character compared to the others. After searching the junkyard for a bit, Javi and Gabe find an ambulance they can siphon gas from. They also find a trailer filled with supplies and a mattress to sleep on. Telling Kate and Mariana, the kids decide they want to spend the night here instead of in the van again. Kate, fearful of the incoming walker herd, argues that they should take the supplies and leave. This is where you're given the first important decision of the episode on whether to leave or stay. Which doesn't matter, because of course it doesn't, as regardless of whose side you choose, a group of armed men will interrupt your plans. Kate and the kids will hide underneath the trailer while Javi confronts the men alone. They accuse him of stealing from their stash, and Javi apologizes, stating he wasn't aware it belonged to anyone, which, yeah, how would he have known that? Outside of the locked door, these chuckleheads did a piss-poor job defending their own supplies. No sign warning others to stay away, or just someone left to guard the stuff from trespassers. The small group's leader, or at least I think he's their leader, this guy in a beanie named Max, acts understanding at first but thinks Javi is covering for his friends that might be hiding nearby. They'll leave to search the area, and leave Javi alone with one guard. This guy is also understanding, but gets suspicious when he hears a noise from where the others are hiding below the trailer. Panicking, Javi will overpower and knock out the guard, but his two buddies promptly return. Things having escalated from theft to assault, Max decides Javi now has to be properly punished, and knocks him out.
Hey, my family, where are they?
Well, 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 if it isn't the consequences of my actions. Javi wakes up in a truck, his hands bound and sitting beside a new face. The driver, Rufus, is with the others and is taking Javi back to their camp where they'll decide what to do with him. He ignores Javi's questions, getting increasingly agitated, and distracting him from a tree falling in their path, causing him to crash. Rufus will take off, and Javi, having gotten his hands on his gun, can shoot the guy or let him go. I chose to let him go, but the outcome of your choice isn't revealed until several episodes later. Regardless, Javi's luck gets even worse as he's immediately held at gunpoint by another person, and it's a familiar face.
This is not what it looks like.
Looks like you let him go. I doubt he'd have done the same for you. Okay, now don't do anything stupid. 'Cause I'm not as nice as you. I won't hesitate.
Oh, sweet pea. What's happened to you? Also, how the hell did you knock over that tree on your own? Now 13 years old, Clementine is no longer the naive, sweet, and scared little girl we saw at the end of Season 2. Whatever she's been through in the last 2 years has made her a more capable survivor, but also colder and deeply distrustful of others. She also has no issues justifying murder either. Clem criticizing Javi if he spares Rufus, before immediately robbing him for his gun and whatever he has in his pockets. But she's not completely heartless. When Javi explains that he needs to get back to the junkyard to save his family, Clem agrees to help, but only in exchange for his family's van. We won't learn what changed Clementine for a while, but I do appreciate what A New Frontier is doing with her character. In Season 2, I liked how they showed that despite Lee's training, Clem wasn't emotionally mature enough to survive on her own, as she immediately struggled after losing Krista. However, that season failed to truly develop her character. She felt sidelined by the conflict with Carver, and later the mess with Kenny and Jane. In A New Frontier, the focus is split between Clem and Javi, essentially making her the second protagonist. Their personal journeys intersect each other in multiple ways, and your choices will determine how well the two get along. Due to the previously mentioned Walker herd, Javi and Clem can't immediately head for the junkyard, so she suggests a detour to Prescott, a settlement nearby where they can wait out the herd safely. When they arrive, they'll have to help the guards take out the walkers outside the gates, and after Javi saves Clem when her gun misfires, the pair will be allowed inside. They're greeted by one of the guards and the possible leader of Prescott, Tripp. Or I think he's the leader, I can't remember if it was stated or not. Tripp recognizes Clem from her past visits, and is fine with her and Javi staying, as long as they don't cause any trouble. Which, of course, means Clem immediately has to start some trouble. After Javi finishes chatting with a couple of locals, Conrad and his wife Francine, he overhears Clem causing a scene. She's confronting Eli, the guy who gave her the faulty bullets that almost got her killed. When things escalate, Javi can step in to back up Clem, disarming Eli when he pulls a knife. Panicked, he promises to fix things, but before they can square things away, Clem's gun misfires, causing her to accidentally shoot Eli in the face.
We had a deal.
All right, hey, okay, all right, so, hey, we'll trade back. I'll find some batteries.
I don't need batteries. What I need are bullets that won't get me killed.
Oh.
Oh no. Oh no.
Remember to follow Eddie the Eagle's advice, kids. Always practice proper gun safety, keep your finger off the trigger, and never point a gun at someone, even if you think it's unloaded or you think it won't fire. The other residents of Prescott rush over and demand answers about why Eli has a bullet hole in his head. You can cover for Clem like she asked by saying she shot him to defend Javi, or tell the truth that it was an accident. If you side with Clem, you both get locked up, but she appreciates you sticking by her. If you tell the truth, Clem gets mad and Tripp drags her off to give her a stern talking to. Either way, Tripp plans to escort you to the junkyard the next morning, and in the next scene you'll meet his old flame and Prescott's medic, Eleanor. Oh man, Eleanor. I don't think I've ever been so wrong about where I thought a game was taking a character. She's introduced as being kind and understanding, insisting on treating the cut on Javi's arm even if he's been locked up. The way Eleanor's friendly with Javi, their initial chemistry, and how she doesn't really elaborate on why her relationship with Tripp fizzled out, made me think she was going to be a potential love interest, giving the player another option if they didn't want to pursue Kate, and throwing Javi into a second love triangle. But that's not how things play out. Eleanor is sympathetic to his situation, and she'll offer to help sneak him and Clementine to the junkyard earlier instead of waiting till morning. What time you leave doesn't matter, as it only affects whether Tripp or Eleanor is with you at the end of the episode. I took her up on her offer, and while waiting for her to return, Clem will catch some Z's and we'll learn what happened to her and AJ after the end of Season 2. Assuming you imported a save, the flashback you see will correspond to what ending you got, and all are fairly stupid and contrived. If you sided with Jane and killed Kenny, Clem will be assisting her in fortifying Hal's hardware. Jane starts feeling sick and runs off. After a while, Clementine checks on her and finds Jane hanging from the ceiling, now a walker after taking her own life. So what exactly drove Jane to make such a drastic decision? To end her life and leave Clementine and AJ behind. As Clem pieces together, Jane learns she was pregnant, most likely with Luke's baby. While Season 2 made it clear that Jane never saw herself as a mother, and it showed through Rebecca just how hard it is for a pregnant woman to survive in this world, her reaction feels a bit extreme, don't you think? Look, I wasn't a fan of Jane, but it feels completely out of character for her to give up so quickly after finding out she's pregnant, especially considering everything she did to survive and expose Kenny's instability. Yeah, I get she doesn't have many options going through with her pregnancy, but Jane strikes me as someone who would guzzle bottles of alcohol non-stop to try and abort her kid, as opposed to hanging herself. Kinda like Krista almost did during that one scene in Season 1. Maybe her surprise pregnancy is meant to be an ironic punishment for how Jane endangered AJ in her plot to drive Kenny crazy, or to motivate Clementine not to give up and raise AJ no matter how tough it gets. But it feels like such a contrived end for a major character. Unfortunately, Kenny doesn't fare much better. If you chose to side with and go with him instead of staying in Wellington, We see that he's mellowed out significantly and is doing a decent job of looking after Clementine and AJ, with the trio having spent several years together. However, during a driving lesson, Clem loses control of the car, crashes, and Kenny is thrown through the windshield. Although he survives the crash, Kenny ends up paralyzed from the waist down. With walkers approaching, Kenny accepts his fate, telling Clem not to blame herself and to take AJ and run without looking back as the undead close in. Like Jane's fate, Kenny's tragic end feels abrupt and like a worse rehash of his Season 1 death. It's also a terrible emotional blow for Clem. While Kenny may not blame her, there's no way she wouldn't feel responsible for his death. He was Clem's last real connection to their original group until Lee, making his loss even harder to bear. Finally, if you sided with Kenny but opted to stay in Wellington like he asked, like I did, Clem and AJ are still there a few years later. They're being cared for by Edith, the guard you meet when you first arrive. Things seem to be going well. The kids are safe, healthy, and well fed. The only concern is that AJ still hasn't started speaking, something Kenny brings up in his flashback scene, which is just a plot point to set up a heartfelt scene later. Then everything falls apart. A group of raiders breaches Wellington's defenses and quickly overruns the place, killing everyone in sight. Edith, Clem, and AJ try to escape, but Edith is shot and killed during the chaos, leaving Clem and AJ to fend for themselves. Once again, the downfall of Wellington feels far too abrupt. For a place that was shown to be well fortified, selective about who could stay, and generous enough to give supplies to those they turned away, it crumbles way too easily. It's especially jarring because we don't see any real resistance from Wellington's people. They're just steamrolled by what seems like a handful of raiders. I understand that in order to have Clementine here, we have to undo whatever ending she got in Season 2, and realistically there's no way to properly undo those endings in a way that makes sense, without dedicating at least one full episode to it, which would require far too much time and resources to create 3 different versions of the same episode. But I still think there could have been a better way. One that, while still abrupt, would require less work and could tie into Clementine's relationship with a certain group, but I'll circle back to this later. After Clem wakes up, she, Javi, and Eleanor will make it back to the junkyard. The place looks like a war zone, with the walker herd having passed through during the night. Fearing the worst, Javi calls out for Kate and the kids, with Mariana quickly appearing. She explains they all hid when the walkers showed up, and last she saw Kate and Gabe, they were heading for the van. The group finds the van completely destroyed, but Kate and Gabe are still nearby, having taken shelter in a truck that's being attacked by walkers. After the walkers have been cleared out, Kate will run into Javi's arms, happy to see him again. And if you feel like pursuing Kate, you can have Javi give her a kiss. Having survived his harrowing experience, and now lacking a car, the group decide to head back to Prescott to plan their next move. The Garcias are in high spirits now that they've been reunited. Unfortunately, this is The Walking Dead. It doesn't take long for things to fall apart.
Thanks.
Mari!
If you're wondering why I barely said anything about Mariana, that's why. While I enjoyed the relative slow burn of this episode, her death is when I locked in, and I was on board for this season. Those assholes from before still won't let it go that Javi accidentally stole some of their supplies. And on top of murdering a child, they also shoot Kate in the stomach. Outgunned and cornered, your final choice for the episode is to either flee back to Prescott to get Kate help, or to heed Clem's warning that those raiders will continue chasing Javi, and choose to fight them off with her. I had Javi back up Clem, the two of them acting as a distraction so the others could safely get away. The episode comes to an end with a literal bang, as the raiders toss a pipe bomb and the screen fades to white as it explodes. Alright, A New Frontier, we're off to a good start. A nice introduction of our new characters, some intrigue surrounding Clementine's past, and AJ's whereabouts, and a touch of tragedy with Mariana's death. Let's see where things go from here.
Please, let me do the dishes. That's the least I can do. I'm crashing here. Crashers clean dishes.
Your family. Besides, if they're not clean the right way, David becomes a big baby about it all.
Episode 2 opens with a flashback set at David's house. While Kate is doing the dishes, Javi offers to help, wanting to feel useful since he's been forced to crash at his brother's home after Javi lost his career. As they chat, Javi is adamant about leaving to start a new life somewhere, with Kate floating the idea she could go with him. Like the opening of the game, the scene showcases Javi's strained relationship with his brother, but also how Kate's marriage to David wasn't great either. While I'm not quite sure if she developed genuine feelings for Javi before the apocalypse, it's obvious she's looking for a way out of her marriage. During their conversation, Kate accidentally breaks David's military glass and cuts her hand. Javi helps bandage her up as David walks in, leading to a tense moment. Angry, he's more concerned for the broken glass and his injured wife, as it was given to David from his commanding officer. Things will start to escalate when Javi tries to calm him down and stand up for Kate. You'll either have to stand down or involve yourself in their marital problems, which, if any of you have married friends, you know that's a terrible idea, and it's better to stay the hell out of it. Depending on what you decided on last episode, after the flashback, if you left with the others, the scene cuts to Kate screaming in pain as Eleanor works to remove the bullet from her stomach. If you stayed with Clementine, Javi wakes up to find that Clem has already finished off the bandits, and even dug a grave for Mariana, allowing Javi to give her a proper burial. It's a heartbreaking scene, not just because Javi couldn't protect his niece, but because it's one of the few times in this series where someone actually gets to grieve and properly lay a loved one to rest. Most of the time, they're forced to leave their dead behind or put them down before they turn into a walker. After Mariana is laid to rest, Javi and Clem will survey the aftermath of their fight. Putting down one of the bandits that turned, Javi spots a nifty brand on his neck, recognizing that the other bandits had it too. Clem explains that it's the mark of a survivor group known as the New Frontier, once good people who have devolved into another raiding group. Javi questions how she knows this, and if the New Frontier was after her, but Clem says she was just stuck in their camp for a short time and saw firsthand the terrible things they've done. While she immediately changes the subject, it's obvious Clem isn't being entirely truthful, and is hiding something. But Javi doesn't press her on it. Random question, guys, but what the hell is the New Frontier's brand supposed to be or represent? Like, I thought it was the number 76 at first, but apparently it's meant to be the Capricorn sign. But nothing in the game explains why they chose the Capricorn symbol, or what it's meant to represent. All you get is that it serves to initiate and test the loyalty of new recruits. I'm guessing it's probably a leftover from content cut from the game, and admittedly I don't really care all that much. It just irked me no one ever explains why they chose that symbol as their brand. Jumping into the bandits' car, Clem and Javi return to Prescott to check on the others. Eleanor has successfully removed the bullet from Kate's stomach and stabilized her, but she warns Javi that Kate isn't out of danger yet. Since Eleanor lacks proper medical tools and training, she's not an actual doctor, just the only one in Prescott with basic first aid skills. There's a good chance Kate won't survive unless they can find a real doctor. Eleanor promises to keep Kate comfortable for now and tells Javi he should check on Gabe, as he was a mess after what happened. We'll find him just outside the gates taking out his frustrations on a walker. Speaking to Gabe, Javi will try to calm him down, and you can give him some closure about Mariana by giving Gabe her cassette player, assuming you didn't choose to bury it with her. Witnessing his sister's death and Kate getting shot, Gabe is consumed with guilt, beating himself up for not doing more. He feels useless for just running away and vows to man up, to defend what's left of his family just as his father would have. Comforting him, Javi reminds Gabe that being a man is about action, not just words. Before they can finish their heart-to-heart, they're interrupted by the arrival of the New Frontier. And it's the same two assholes from the junkyard. Max, the guy in the beanie, and Badger, the one who killed Mariana. Unwilling to let go of their grudge, especially now that Javi has killed some of their friends, which was their fault for escalating the situation in the first place, they demand that Prescott hand him over. When Javi refuses, they reveal they have a hostage, Conrad's wife Francine. And to show that they're not fucking around, they start cutting off her fingers. You'll have to decide if Javi gives himself up, tries and negotiates, or just starts blasting. Whatever you choose, it always ends the same, with Francine getting executed, both groups engaging in a firefight, and the New Frontier destroying Prescott, which they do by ramming their truck full of walkers into the town, the walkers and the New Frontier killing everyone inside. Our heroes will escape the mayhem, now whittled down to Javi, Gabe, Kate, Clem, Tripp, Eleanor, and Conrad. Conrad, understandably consumed by anger and grief, blames Javi for what happened. While Javi is willing to let him vent, Gabe pulls a gun and demands that Conrad back off. Javi urges him to stand down, and some intervention from Clem gets Gabe to back off. The group will then discuss their options, and Clem suggests they head for Richmond, claiming a large community is set up there and it's possible they may have the resources to treat Kate. With no other options, the group starts gathering their things. Before leaving, Eleanor notices Gabe and Clem getting chatty, wondering if those two crazy kids could hit it off. Javi agrees and thinks that the kids having someone their own age to speak to could actually be good for both of them. I'll leave it alone for now, but the game really tries to ship Clem and Gabe throughout the season, and it just does not work for me one bit. During the drive to Richmond, Kate will wake up and, knowing she's in bad shape, is slowly coming to peace with the fact she might not make it. She's distraught over Mariana's death and worries about Gabe's mental state. Kate loves him, but she's unsure if he might turn out like David or more like Javi, asking him to watch out for Gabe's well-being in case she dies. Javi promises he will, but also reassures Kate that she isn't going anywhere, and not to give up. The scene shifts to the following morning, the path ahead blocked by several wrecked cars. After using the winch from a tow truck to clear the path, they quickly discover the blockade was set up to prevent a massive herd of walkers from getting through. Quickly overwhelmed by the undead, Javi tells Eleanor to drive ahead with Kate and the others will find a way to catch up. Everyone gets to high ground and soon spots a mysterious person spying on them. Unsure of his intentions, Javi will sneak around to try and get the drop on him, but gets bamboozled by a decoy, and Hobo Jesus gets the drop on him instead. He asks what Javi's group is up to, and the interrogation soon gets flipped when Clem distracts him and Javi disarms him. They'll ask Hobo Jesus if he's part of the New Frontier, and Javi will check him for a brand when he says he isn't. He's on his way to Richmond to find out what happened to some friends he lost contact with. Hobo Jesus then drops a bombshell. Richmond has fallen, and is now under the control of the New Frontier. The group panics, and Javi realizes he just sent Eleanor and Kate into danger. Clem takes it the hardest, separating herself from the others and busily hyperventilating when hearing the news. Hobo Jesus reveals they can take some tunnels to sneak into Richmond and can guide them there. Oh, and he'll finally give his name to the rest of the group.
Sorry, forgot to introduce myself. It's Paul, but my friends call me Jesus.
Okay, so I didn't actually know he was going to introduce himself as Jesus when I was referring to him as Hobo Jesus. That was just a funny coincidence that happened while I was taking notes. Also, Jesus is the same Jesus from the Walking Dead comics, who was part of the Hilltop Colony and made contact with Rick's group. I'd say more about him, but I never finished reading the comics, and I don't remember much about his appearance on the TV show either. Entering the tunnels, we're hit with another Clementine flashback. It's brief, but shows Clem's first encounter with the New Frontier. While taking shelter with AJ, she meets one of their members, Ava. Seeing a teenage girl struggling to care for a baby on her own, Ava takes pity on Clem, shows her the New Frontier brand, and invites Clementine to join their group. Back in the present, Clem confides in Javi, revealing that she was once a member of the New Frontier, and revealing she was branded too. She apologizes for hiding the truth and explains not all members were like the ones he encountered. Clem regrets joining them, but in her desperation, she saw it as the best way for her and AJ to survive. But now that the New Frontier controls Richmond, she can't let them see her and asks Javi not to tell the others about it. Unfortunately, because they were whispering super loud in an echoey tunnel, Conrad overhears them. After encountering some walkers and running into a subway car for safety, he'll confront the pair when Jesus and Trip go up above. Holding them at gunpoint, he forces Clem to reveal the brand, confirming what he overheard, and exposing her secret to Gabe. Conrad decides they can use Clementine as a bargaining chip to get whatever they want in Richmond in exchange for handing her over to the New Frontier. Javi opposes the idea, and Conrad will try to force his hand by grabbing and threatening to kill Gabe. You now have to decide to betray Clementine's trust by agreeing and exposing her to the others, or stick by her and shoot Conrad in the face. I chose to shoot him in the face.
Holy shit!
At the time, I didn't realize this, but outside of how the season ends, this is actually the most impactful choice in the entire game. Outside of affecting your relationship with Clem, siding with Conrad here doesn't just let him live to the end of the episode, it can lead to him surviving throughout the rest of the season too. I had this complaint with Season 2, but your choices don't diverge much compared to Season 1. That's still the case in A New Frontier, with how long Conrad survives being the only real exception. And honestly, I hate that. Mostly because Conrad doesn't do much if he sticks around, and he barely did anything before this point. So I don't get why the developers would choose to make him the character you can save. The deciding factor to keep him alive is agreeing with him and betraying Clementine, something the overwhelming majority of players wouldn't do. It doesn't even make sense from a story perspective. Javi hardly knows Conrad. I mean, he barely knows Clementine, but I'd say they're closer. Plus, the fact that Conrad resorts to threatening Gabe's life makes it even less likely that Javi would side with him in the first place. So it doesn't feel fulfilling to keep a nobody like Conrad around over just helping Clem. Alright, let's get a move on. This episode's almost done. Clem will take off to avoid running into the new frontier. Javi lies to Tripp and Jesus that Conrad was killed by walkers. And after walking around Richmond, they'll discover Eleanor's car abandoned. Kate's inside and explains that Eleanor left to get help but still hasn't returned. Out of options and with Kate in desperate need of treatment, Javi decides they just walk up to the gates of Richmond and plead their case. Unfortunately, we run into that asshole Max again, who isn't going to let bygones be bygones. Just when the situation is about to escalate into violence, the episode comes to an end with a shocking revelation, as Javi comes face to face with one of the New Frontier's leaders.
What the hell's going on out here?
They said they weren't here to hurt anybody, so I was trying to see if they...
Oh my god.
Dad?
Episode 3 begins with another flashback, this time set a few months after the zombie apocalypse began. Javi and Kate are scavenging their neighborhood for supplies while taking shelter in their family home with the kids, doing their best to survive and clinging to the hope that David will return. Kate has been struggling to keep it together, and after they're forced to put down a walker that used to be one of Gabe's friends, she's desperate to leave their home for somewhere safer. Back home, Javi tells Gabe and Mariana about their plans to leave. Gabe immediately becomes upset, still holding on to the hope that his father will come back, but after hearing what happened to his friend, he reluctantly agrees to leave. Still worried about David, Javi leaves a note in case he returns, hoping they'll be able to reunite one day.
Javi! Is that really you? I always hoped I'd find you. Never really thought it'd happen. Not after all this time.
I thought you were dead, man. I thought you'd been dead for a long time.
No such luck.
In the present, we pick up where episode 2 left off with the reveal that David is alive and part of the New Frontier. Honestly, it's not a surprising twist. The flashback showing Javi's friction with his brother made it clear David would resurface sooner or later. But given the circumstances, David's reaction to seeing his family alive after all these years feels incredibly underwhelming, as if he was just gone for a few hours and he just got home from work or something. I honestly expected way more emotion. I thought David would fall to his knees, overwhelmed with gratitude or even sobbing because he had given up hope they were alive, or at least show some appreciation to Javi for protecting him all this time. Instead, we get a casual, "Oh hey, you guys are alive. Cool, thanks bro." Like shit dude, can you at least pretend you're happy to see your brother again? Shane put more effort in seeing Rick again. David will get his men to stand down, thanking Javi for looking out for his family, kinda, and taking Kate off his hands so he can take her to get treated. Gabe will tag along with him, but Javi, Tripp, and Jesus don't get the VIP treatment. They get thrown into a dingy locker room to be quarantined and screened for walker bites instead. While there, they reunite with Eleanor, and she explains the New Frontier took her in but completely ignored her request to retrieve and help Kate. Tripp informs her that Richmond's been taken over by the New Frontier, and that Javi's brother is among them. Jesus chimes in, suggesting David might actually help get them out of quarantine, and even help gain acceptance in the New Frontier. Javi, however, isn't so sure it'll be that easy, especially since David left them to fend for themselves earlier. Even if David does help, Tripp hasn't forgotten what happened to Prescott, and isn't looking to play nice with the ones responsible for murdering his friends. David will arrive to fetch his brother, but the others are forced to wait in quarantine.
Go along with them for now? That doesn't sound good. We have a process, our own way of doing things. Your guys better not have a problem with that. Things don't go well for troublemakers here. I hope that's clear.
David doesn't act very brotherly when speaking to Javi, acting more like a drill sergeant laying down the law. Though in his defense, it's partially because he's grieving after finding out from Gabe that Mariana died, not so subtly blaming Javi for what happened. David admits it's an odd feeling grieving someone twice, mellowing out as he asks Javi what his little girl was like, what type of person she became while he was gone. Since Mariana was an extremely flat character, Javi just says she was a kind soul who saw the good in everyone and wanted to leave a record of her memories before she died. It's generic as fuck, but I guess it's better than saying she loved candy bars and listening to music. Javi informs David that she was executed by his people, and they shot Kate too. He doesn't believe him at first, but when his brother tells him Max and Badger were involved, David relents. He vows to bring justice to Badger, but asks Javi to keep everything under wraps for now. The politics within the New Frontier are messy, and he needs to impress the other leaders if he wants to stay in their good graces. Aside from David, who heads up security, there's Dr. Lingard, the head of medicine, Joan, the head of diplomacy, and Clint, who's in charge of food and rations. The four of them founded the New Frontier together, and dividing power amongst them has kept things functional and relatively fair. On the way to the hospital, David introduces Javi to his right-hand woman and trusted friend, Ava. She was part of David's old army unit and the first person he reunited with after being separated from his family. Which prompts Javi to address the elephant in the room and ask why David never came back.
We waited for you for 3 months. Eventually the house was overrun and we had to move. Why didn't you come back?
David explains that he was on his way to the hospital with their mom when everything went sideways. After she turned and he put her down, he couldn't get back into Baltimore. Instead, he made contact with his old unit and tried to build a safe zone outside the city, assuming the worst had happened to his family with how quickly everything fell apart. While David genuinely sounds regretful for not finding them, it's also very obvious he didn't bother to try. David skirts the issue by buttering up Javi, praising him for protecting Kate and the kids, claiming he was wrong about his reckless little brother and that he's really changed. None of which sounds remotely genuine considering how nonchalant he was about seeing him earlier.
Hey!
Hey, kid. Got everything you need?
Yeah. This place is like a resort. Check it out, Javi. Noodles in a cup.
We need to get you some real food. Stat. Turn you into a soldier.
Inside the hospital, Javi reunites with Gabe and Kate, who's feeling a lot better after being treated by Dr. Lingard. But it's clear Kate is uncomfortable around David. She fakes being in pain to get some time alone with Javi, where she confides that she doesn't trust Richmond and is worried about the man David has become. Kate begs Javi to leave with her when the opportunity rises, feeling that they're safer on the road. Interestingly, she says it's always been the two of us, not mentioning bringing Gabe along. This had me questioning how genuine her feelings really are for Javi, and if she's as sympathetic as initially shown. Recalling an earlier discussion with Javi, when she told David when they were dating she wasn't cut out to be a mom, and made it clear she wasn't going to change who she was when he proposed, why did she agree to marry him in the first place? Yes, David can be intense, but Kate should have known what she was getting into. Maybe she hoped David would change, but the flashbacks don't explore their marriage enough, only showing that both were unhappy. This makes her pursuit of Javi feel more like an escape from her misery than genuine love, making me question why the game is so adamant about pushing them together. Their conversation is interrupted when David returns with Dr. Lingard. David is immediately suspicious that Kate seems fine, but the doctor diffuses the situation, explaining that her injury can cause irregular bouts of pain, and praising Eleanor's work on her. And he even offers to vouch for Eleanor's early release from quarantine. The good doctor also informs David that it's time for the council meeting regarding whether Javi can stay. Dr. Lingard can't join them, but has already cast his vote to side with David.
It may look pretty, but it's all sugars. There's no substance.
It tastes pretty, Clint. That's all that matters. Ah, the brother.
Javi.
The scene shifts to a church where Javi will meet the remaining leaders, Joan and Clint. While they're friendly to Javi, they expect everyone to follow the council's orders, and they won't make any exceptions for him due to being David's brother. Joan explains they helped establish their group along with David and started branding members as a test of loyalty after several betrayals almost destroyed their group in the past. She admits the brand hasn't always been reliable. Honestly, I'm not really sure how it would be, but it's their crude way of dealing with outsiders wanting to join. Javi can empathize with their commitment, but is then caught off guard when Max is escorted in by 2 guards. Clint explains that he brought Max in because he knew there were some tensions between him and Javi. David is annoyed that Clint went around his authority, but lets Max speak. Max recounts his first encounter with Javi, accusing him of stealing gas from their vehicle. Javi can either deny it or claim he didn't know the vehicle was theirs, but either way, Joan and Clint aren't pleased. Max also brings up the incident with Rufus, the driver of the truck you could choose to kill or spare in the first episode. Since I spared that asshole, he repaid my kindness by claiming Javi and Clem were working together to steal the truck. Javi defends himself, saying he only did what he had to in order to protect his people, but calls out Joan for going too far, prompting her to ask what else he has to say. You're then given the choice to stay silent or tell the truth about Max's group killing Mariana. Javi's fate is sealed regardless, as the council vote to banish him from Richmond. Trip and Jesus getting kicked out with them. As they're escorted out, Ava will give them a bag of supplies sent by David. Our dear brother didn't bother to put any food or water inside, just weapons and a map with directions to a meeting spot outside of town. During the walk, we're reunited with Clementine. After hearing that David is Javi's brother, she warns that they can't trust him, and we're thrown into another flashback. Clem is sneaking around the New Frontiers camp trying to get medicine for a visibly sick AJ, whom the others, David included, have already written off as a lost cause. They don't specify what's wrong with them. Honestly, it looks like he just has the flu to me. But whatever it is, the only treatment is an antibiotic called vancomycin. The group has one vial left and it's being guarded by Dr. Lingard, though he's currently strung out from whatever drugs he's taken. Finding the antibiotic, Dr. Junkie wakes up just as Clementine is about to inject AJ with it. He insists it's too late for AJ and promises he won't report Clem if she stops what she's doing. Whether you decide to inject AJ or not, Clem will get spotted and the antibiotic ends up destroyed if she doesn't use it. David and the others chew her out for her actions, Clem firing back that the assholes didn't even try to help AJ. Fed up with her attitude and breaking the rules, David kicks her out of the group, and just to be a bigger asshole, orders she gets separated from AJ too. Which, man, sure is some logic. The New Frontier were already condemning AJ to death by not treating his illness, and are potentially doing the same to Clementine by kicking her out to fend for herself. Outside of just being petty, by their own logic, they'd be wasting resources taking care of AJ till he died, as opposed to just letting him leave with Clem. Ava does get David to agree to let Clementine say goodbye to AJ at least.
I love you, goofball. I love you.
Come on, Clem.
While this scene is definitely a tearjerker, the way Clem and AJ are separated feels really stupid. The whole survival of the fittest mentality that the New Frontier shows here is completely out of place and it's never shown anywhere else in the game. It also doesn't justify their hostility towards Clem, because back in the present, when the group meets up with David in a warehouse, he reveals that AJ survived. So the New Frontier just comes off as a bunch of stupid assholes who condemned Clem to die alone, simply because she tried to save AJ. Was it really that hard to take it on the chin, admit they were wrong, and invite Clem back? Like, the game tries to frame it as David's hypocrisy at play, but Ava and the others were complicit in it too. Not a single person argued to let Clem stay. And as shown by the other leaders, they adhered to a one-strike-and-you're-out policy of enforcing the rules. Honestly, it's amazing the New Frontier didn't immediately collapse, and the ones that they outcast didn't just form their own faction to take them out. Continuing the string of revelations, the gang stumble upon supplies looted from Prescott and other settlements. David insists he knows nothing about this, and on cue, those assholes Max and Badger show up. Eavesdropping on their conversation, we learn that David's men have been secretly raiding towns behind his back, with Joan revealed as the mastermind. A fight then breaks out between both groups, with Javi chasing after and getting into a brawl with Badger. It comes to an end when Javi fatally injures the bald asshole with his own shotgun, and you can either let him bleed out, or bash his brains in. Well, as they say in baseball, play ball.
No point drawing it out.
Regrouping with the others, David thanks Javi for avenging Mariana's death. Our group captured Max, but the other guy who was with them escaped and is no doubt on his way to tell Joan. Time is of the essence and you'll have to decide what to do with Max. Send him off to hell with Badger, or use him as a witness to expose Joan. I chose the latter option. In the morning, the group heads for Richmond, with Jesus breaking off to return to his people and warn them about what he learned about the New Frontier. Once inside Richmond, everyone will split up. Clem wants to ask around for AJ's location. Javi heads to the hospital to get Kate and Gabe to bring them to David's place. David takes Max to go confront Joan, and Tripp decides to look for Eleanor. Touching base with Kate, she says Joan had come to see her and made it sound like David was being stripped of his authority. Worried about the mess that's going to unfold, Kate argues they should take this chance to escape Richmond, but Gabe doesn't want to leave without his father. It's choice time again. Stay the course by going to David's house, or cut and run. I side with Gabe, getting everyone to hide out at David's place while Javi left with Ava to meet up with David.
I don't like your tone, David. If this is about your brother...
Don't pretend like you don't know what this is about. You've got a lot to answer for.
Me? You must be joking.
Joan denounces David for smuggling his brother into Richmond against the council's decision, and suggests he be punished. Clint tries to ease the tension and asks why Javi and David returned to Richmond, but is shocked when Javi accuses Joan of orchestrating the raids without David's knowledge. Lingard presses Joan for the truth, but she flatly denies the allegations, and Clint demands proof before accepting the accusation. Since I kept Max alive, we toss him in front of the council to confess. He admits that he, Badger, and Lonnie carried out the raids under Joan's orders. Clint and Lingard demand to know why, and Joan defends herself, claiming it was a necessary evil in order to sustain Richmond, that it was the only way she could supply Clint with fertilizer for crops and Lingard with medicine to treat patients. She makes a show about how it was for the greater good of the new frontier, that it was a temporary measure until the city was self-sustaining, playing the martyr card that she'll carry the burdens of what happened the rest of her life. David doesn't buy what she's selling, since those raids cost his daughter's life, but Clint and Lingard back down and side with Joan. David's own soldiers, minus Ava who slips out, all turn against him and follow Joan's orders to subdue the brothers. The episode comes to an end when Javi is knocked out and locked up. Oof. This episode is when the cracks in the season's writing really start to show, and it's just a straight nosedive till the finale.
Damn it.
Strike one.
I'm out of practice, that's all.
Same here. I haven't held a bat since the league booted me.
Well, you got all afternoon to get back in your groove.
Oh yeah. Just holding this thing makes me feel better.
Hey look, another flashback. This time it's of David and Javi at the batting cages. After hitting a few balls, the stressed out David admits to his brother he's thinking about re-enlisting in the army. He hates his job, his marriage is circling the toilet since he's constantly fighting with Kate, and he can't adjust to civilian life. David has had a lot of time to think about it and believes the best thing for everyone would be if he was back in the army. Knowing Kate will need a lot of support, he'll ask Javi to help her and look out for the kids, which he can agree to or remind David that that's his job. While this flashback doesn't make David sympathetic, it does show he isn't just some one-note evil asshole jealous of his brother. He's a man who lost his purpose after returning to a normal life. But David isn't solving his problems by re-enlisting. He's running away from them and expects Javi to pick up the pieces. Ironically, the same exact thing Kate is doing, which made it really hard to care about siding with either one of them. I'm going to speedrun through the next two episodes since they pretty much blend together, and honestly, by this point, I was checked out and just focused on finishing the game. After the flashback, we're shown Javi and David in quarantine, but David doesn't stay for long as Joan drops by to take him somewhere else. Javi breaks out with Gabe's help, and the two return to David's apartment to reunite with Kate, Tripp, Eleanor, and Ava. Trapped in Richmond due to a large herd of walkers outside the gates, and unable to move around since Joan's people are looking for them, everyone agrees they should get some guns to defend themselves at least. Sneaking off with Gabe and Ava, the trio will raid the city's armory for some guns. Javi and Gabe will then head to the medical area after a guard cuts Javi's arm. There, they'll bump into Clem, trying to wake up a strung-out Dr. Lingard. She's also been having some other issues, too.
I started bleeding. I know, it's a thing. I've traveled with women before, and they all had it. What is it? I mean, like, why is it... I just don't understand.
It means you're growing up, blossoming into your, like, womanhood. Your body is developing, and then things change, but it'll be okay.
Okay.
For as critical as I've been about the writing of this season, I like that they treat Clementine starting to have her period as being a normal thing. It feels like the writers could have easily milked the whole thing for cheap drama in an episode, and ended on a cheesy note about how Clem's growing up and she's becoming a woman, before some kind of contrived plot twist happens. While waiting for Dr. Lingard to wake up, Clem will patch Javi up, and we get a flashback to how Ava tried to square things with Clem after they kicked her out of the New Frontier. She apologizes for forcibly removing AJ from her, gives Clem some supplies and a drawing that AJ made. Aw, it looks just like her. But Ava also tells Clem she needs to let it go and grow the hell up, that she and the others feel bad for what they did, and that's just the way of the world. I really don't understand the point of this flashback. Like, is it just to paint the New Frontier as being even bigger assholes? Or that they're misguided assholes who think they're doing the right thing? Like, Ava isn't inviting Clem back. Sure, she gave her some supplies, but she's still leaving a 13-year-old girl to survive on her own. I guess it's to expand Ava's relationship with Clem, but Ava does so little in the story, and barely interacts with Clem in the present, that it doesn't amount to anything. Wouldn't surprise me if she had a bigger role that got reduced during development. And I get the same exact vibe from Dr. Lingard when he finally wakes up. Still strung out, he gets depressed when finding out David didn't break out with Javi, and that Joan still has him. Clem presses why he cares about David, and Lingard says that she doesn't really know him, and that he's a better man than she knows, as David was the one who stepped up to take care of and raise AJ when the kid got better. Clem calls bullshit, as if David was the one who took care of AJ, why would he tell her to ask Lingard where the kid was? Lingard, realizing that's what Clem's been after, makes her a deal. He'll tell her where she can find AJ. In exchange, we have to put him out of his misery by injecting him with the drug he's holding. Wait, what? Lingard explains he's given up on life before David found him and got him to care again. Now that it looks like David is going to be executed by Joan, he's completely given up again. Welp, who am I to deny him relief from his agony? Nighty-night, Doc. Honestly, I had more to say, but because Lingard's logic and devotion don't make much sense since he's barely fleshed out, I'm going to chalk it up to his role getting downsized and just move on. He tells Clem AJ is staying on some farm several miles outside of Richmond. She and Javi then regroup with Ava and Gabe, returning to David's apartment. Regrouping with the others, they debate on what to do about Joan, and settle on taking the fight to her, ambushing her during David's public execution, and hopefully saving him. Gabe wants to tag along to save his dad, but Javi doesn't want to risk his life, and after some back and forth, the little shit loudly puts his uncle on blast, revealing to Tripp and Eleanor that Javi killed Conrad. I'd normally lay into Gabe for being an ungrateful little bastard, but he's a dumb kid worried about his dad dying. I'm willing to give him a pass. Tripp and Eleanor get pissy Javi didn't tell them despite explaining what Conrad did, so they kick him out of the apartment. Feels like it should be the other way around considering it's his brother's apartment and not theirs, but okay. Ava's still cool though, and will hit us up later when it's time to save David. In the meantime, the Garcia family, plus Clem, will steal an armored truck from the New Frontier to use for their escape once David is saved. Oh, and Kate fully confesses her feelings for Javi, and you can choose to make it official with her if you want. What you decide does impact one of the game's endings, though not by much. I had Javi return her feelings, but like I said, I stopped caring about their relationship already. Heading to the town square, Joan has gone mask off, ditching her phony, caring, and understanding side, and going full tyrant, making a big show of David's execution, pinning the deaths of Dr. Lingard and Badger on him. Also, the plan to ambush her goes tits up, as Eleanor snitched we were coming. Well, thanks a lot, Eleanor. I'm starting to think you were the problem in your relationship with Tripp and not him. Speaking of which, Joan has captured him and Ava, forcing Javi to choose one of them to live and condemning the other to death. Except not really, as she'll actually kill the person you choose to save. Well, shit. My bad, Tripp. Other than that Conrad thing, you're actually a cool dude. His blood is on your hands, Eleanor, you traitor. Clint, growing a backbone and believing Joan has gone too far, offers Javi a deal to stop the violence. Instead of killing him, they'll banish David, Javi, and their family from Richmond, so long as they promise never to return.
Shoot that bitch! Take her out! She deserves it! If you don't do it, I fucking will! Go to hell, Joan!
Joan just killed one of our sort of friends, and her raids were responsible for Mariana's death. Of course I was gonna shoot that bitch in the face. Especially because if I didn't, David would get free, he'll end up killing Clint, and Joan would disappear, never getting her comeuppance for her crimes. It's such a stupid choice because you punish the player and let the villain win if you decide to spare them. Anyways, we save David from being hanged. Chaos breaks out on the streets as we fight the Joan loyalists. Kate tries to save everyone in the armored truck, but gets hit by a stray Molotov, which causes her to crash into the city wall. The van explodes and blows a huge hole in the wall. The episode ends with Kate's fate up in the air, and tons of walkers pouring into Richmond. Alright, final episode, let's go. Skipping over the flashback this time, it's just Javi and David learning their dad has cancer. A lesson about legacy and how the two of them need to support each other. Blah blah blah, dilly dally shilly shally, it doesn't matter. Picking up from the last episode's cliffhanger, it's revealed Kate got out of the van before it exploded, and she rejoins Javi, Gabe, David, and Clem. The group dynamic gets all fucked up now that David is here. His son doesn't see him as infallible now since his dad started gunning down Joan loyalists after we saved him. He also gets on Javi's case for killing Joan in the first place, insisting they only attack because we shot first. Gabe, were your eyes closed when she executed Tripp? What the fuck are you going on about? I know what the game is trying to do here. It's calling Javi a hypocrite for tying his rationale back to that scene in episode 2, where he told Gabe not to pull a gun on Conrad. But Conrad wasn't an immediate threat, whereas Joan was holding a public execution for David, and forcing Javi into a sadistic choice, executing whoever he chose to save. Gabe's sudden "we shouldn't kill anyone" stance makes no sense and just feels like a clumsy way to show he's outgrown his initial "I need to be a man like my dad" mindset. Like Kate, David can't handle his son when he gets pissy. He tries to lay down the law, but he comes off like he's trying too hard. Javi calls him out on it, causing David to deflate and explain he's just trying to protect Gabe. It's enough to convince Gabe to join him as they make sure the area is secure, but it's obvious David is agitated and feeling out of place with his brother leading the group. Clem will keep an eye on those two, and in the meantime, Javi and Kate will check in on how the residents of Richmond are doing. Spoilers, not great, as the combo of the New Frontier turning on one another and the walkers overwhelming the city has decimated their community. Even though she's not really at fault, it was the guy who threw the Molotov's fault, really. Kate feels responsible for the situation. Reconnecting with Eleanor, she blames Javi for the current situation, his fight with Joan and Tripp's death, which, fuck you, Eleanor. If you hadn't snitched to Joan in the first place, Tripp and Ava wouldn't have been captured, and Javi probably could have assassinated Joan. Also, woof, she still friend-zoned Tripp after his death. Couldn't even say she loved him, just that he was her best friend. Now I feel even worse for letting him die. Asking her why she told Joan in the first place, Eleanor explains she was trying to fix a bad situation, which doesn't really explain anything. In fact, as she goes on about how she could help Richmond and that people would need her since Dr. Lingard was dead, it just comes off like Eleanor sold out the others to secure a place here. Her betrayal is foreshadowed way back in episode 1 when Clem says she trusts Eleanor less than Tripp, but it still feels like a half-assed twist. Again, this is probably because of cut content, because Eleanor was originally supposed to be Joan's daughter. So her betraying the group makes a lot more sense. Some drama happens when a guard guilt trips Kate and Javi being responsible for her daughter's death because they destroyed the wall. David will show up to make things worse by breaking her arm to disarm her. He'll then leave when everyone looks at him like he's crazy. Following him up to the roof, if you stand beside David, he'll finally drop the tough guy act and open up.
Why the hell are you smiling?
See that sewer line over there? Perfect placement for a trench. That hill about 100 paces west of it. A sniper's wildest dream come true. I'm a soldier, Javi. I see this landscape like a painter sees a blank canvas. Like how you used to see a baseball diamond. I'm a soldier. This makes sense to me. I was made for this. I thrive in this.
Maybe it's crazy. But sometimes crazy things make sense. If only a little.
This is actually a powerful moment with David. He admits he's been thriving in this new world, and that he's not cut out to be a husband or a father. David confesses his jealousy of Javi, saying he genuinely wanted to change but doesn't know how, wondering aloud if it's even possible to change who you really are inside. David is dropping the act and admitting his weakness. The conversation feels like it's trying to set up a redemption arc for David, whether that means stepping up to fix the mess in Richmond, or realizing he needs to let his family go and accept they're better off with Javi. Unfortunately, things don't quite play out that way for David. After the brothers finish their heart-to-heart, the rest of the group joins them on the roof. Oh hey, Ava's alive! And she's a bit miffed that Javi chose to save Tripp. Though, considering what happened to him, maybe she should be a little more grateful? Still, Ava drops the issue quickly, acknowledging that Joan forced Javi into an impossible situation. She also reports that Richmond is overrun, with half the city now occupied by walkers. Feeling guilty about the hole in the wall, and realizing that the massive walker presence makes escaping the city difficult, Javi suggests they try to salvage the situation and find a way to plug the hole. Kate mentions she spotted some construction vehicles near where they took the armored car, and the group decides to head there. Not long after they begin their journey, Ava abruptly ends up dying when trying to save Javi from falling down an overpass. Not by sacrificing herself to save him, mind you, but by getting ambushed by a random walker. A walker that might as well have spawned out of nowhere, since it wasn't visible when the others passed by the car was hiding in, and they were arguably louder than Javi and Ava were. She sticks around for maybe an extra 5 minutes in this episode, but I think they should have just confirmed Ava was dead at the start and called it a day, instead of wasting time with this Deus Ex Machina walker death. Moving on, the story keeps flip-flopping on what to do with David. First, he grows more suspicious about Kate and Javi's relationship, becoming increasingly upset that his brother is taking his place. Then, after Ava's death, which does actually hit him pretty hard, he overhears Clem and Javi talking and opens up about why he gave up AJ. After taking AJ from Clem, David stepped up to raise him as a way of making amends, and because he had experience as a parent. He admits he grew close to AJ, and genuinely loved him, but after a harsh winter wiped out much of their crops and killed several people, David was afraid. He wasn't sure he could keep AJ alive while also supporting the people of Richmond, so he decided it was best to give AJ to people who could care for him. Worried he'd go back on his decision, he had Lingard fight a home for AJ, and swore never to reveal his location. David accepted that he wasn't fit to care for AJ, and, even though it broke him, gave him up for the boy's sake, which kinda feels like foreshadowing that he's gonna do the same exact thing with his family, and accept that Javi is better off taking care of them than him. But unfortunately, when we get to the construction site, David makes the complete opposite choice.
What are you doing?
The right thing. I'm leaving. We're all leaving.
What? And going where? You saw it yourself. We're surrounded by the herd.
I'm taking my family out of here.
Despite everything David said earlier, about Richmond looking like a battlefield where he thrived, about being a soldier not cut out to be a father or husband, and his dedication to the city and reasoning for giving AJ away, he suddenly decides they should abandon Richmond. Out of nowhere, he wants to cut and run with his family, plus Clem, to return to their old home. This shift makes absolutely no sense, as it contradicts everything we learned about him and everything it was trying to set up. The obvious explanation is that David's a hypocrite who runs when things get tough, but I don't really buy that. The story spends so much time emphasizing how he can't function as a family man and only thrives as a soldier, so this sudden flip-flop feels completely out of character. The revelation that Kate and Javi are a couple would justify the change, but the issue is that he doesn't learn it until after this scene, and he decides to run even if he chose not to make it official with Kate. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but the Javi, Kate, David love triangle mirrors a similar relationship in The Walking Dead, the triangle of Rick, Lori, and Shane. The family dynamic is a bit different, but initially I thought the story would go in that direction. Javi and Kate become a couple in David's absence, and his return creates tension as he realizes Javi has stepped into the protector role, leading to an inevitable confrontation between the brothers over Kate and Gabe. But starting in episode 3, the focus shifts to Joan's actions within the New Frontier, and the game spends time fleshing out David from a one-note abusive husband to a man who was never suited for family life. The game can't seem to decide if it wants Joan or David to be the villain, and once Joan is out of the picture, it rushes back to the original love triangle conflict. And because having Javi and Kate as a couple is optional, David's motives make even less sense for players who rejected Kate's advances and sided more with David. David's sudden shift is all to justify the big confrontation between him and Javi that the season initially set up. After he announces his plan to run, Gabe will agree to go with him, but Kate will push back, slapping David and declaring she's done being pushed around by him. Depending on her choices, she'll either reveal she and Javi are an item, or turn her back on him along with David, which causes him to lose it and get into a brawl with Javi, beginning the end for this season.
I should have known. I should have known the night Pa died. The night you weren't there. Blood is worthless to you, just like he was to you, just like I am to you. Well, it's time for you to finally learn what blood really means.
David! Dad!
This fight between David and Javi is exactly what I was expecting, and hoping for at the start of the season. But after everything that's happened to get here, it feels so forced. If you choose to fight back, you're locked out of saving David in the end. Go the pacifist route, and Javi just takes an ass whooping while repeatedly telling David he loves him, trying to reach the good person he believes his brother is. Side note, this instantly reminded me of the Supernatural Season 5 finale, and the original series finale, where Dean does the same thing while getting beaten by a Lucifer-possessed Sam, except that scene was way more emotionally charged. Honestly, the series should have ended there. Come to think of it, Supernatural would have been perfect for a Telltale-style game. Alright, getting on track now. The game's almost over. Clem intervenes just as David seems ready to kill Javi, but then David grabs Gabe and drives off in the truck. This leads to the final decision. Go with Kate to seal the Richmond breach, or go after David and Gabe. And a hidden factor influences the outcome of each choice: Clementine's loyalty. Depending on how you sided with Clem and what choices you made for her in the flashbacks, she'll either join Javi's decision, or choose the opposite. This creates 4 possible endings with slight variations based on Javi's relationship with Kate and David. If you choose to go after David and Gabe but Clem doesn't come along, Javi finds their truck surrounded by walkers. Alone, he can only save Gabe and has to put down David, who's been bitten. Back in Richmond, Kate and Clem manage to seal the breach, but Kate is nowhere to be seen afterwards and is presumed dead. If Clem tags along with Javi to save Gabe and David, both survive. David still wants to leave everything behind, but if his relationship with Javi is strong enough, Javi convinces him to return. Kate manages to save Richmond but is bitten and becomes a walker. If Javi decides to help Kate while Clem goes after David and Gabe, Javi successfully seals the breach and Kate survives. Later, Clem returns with Gabe, though David has died off-screen. Javi and Kate retrieve David's dog tags and give him a proper burial. Finally, in the ending I got, choosing to help Kate with Clem at his side saves Richmond, but David and Gabe are both lost. Searching for them, when they arrive, they find David already dead and Gabe bitten and fading fast, giving us just enough time to have a final moment with them. He gives Clem his deck of cards and requests a gun to prevent from turning, though you can have Javi do it for him instead. In all endings, Jesus reappears with friends from the Hilltop Colony in order to help clear out the walkers in Richmond. The final scenes take place days later, with Javi and the surviving characters reflecting on those they've lost. For my playthrough, it's Kate beside him. Although saddened by Gabe and David's deaths, Kate quickly moves on, ready to start a new family with Javi. Heading outside, Javi says goodbye to Jesus, who praises his actions and tells him to step up and become the leader of Richmond, confident that he has the stuff to make it a better place. Javi then speaks to Clem, who's pondering her next move, and asks if he can give her a quick trim.
All done.
Well, how's it look?
You know what? I'll grab your hat.
I think I'm gonna miss the pigtails, but this new look isn't terrible. Clementine then asks what you should do about AJ. Leave him to his new life or bring him back to Richmond. Considering everything she went through for him, being forcibly separated, and the fact that we don't really know if he's doing any better on that farm, I told Clem to bring AJ home. The game ends as we say goodbye to Clem, and if you stick around through the credits, you'll see her retracing our steps from earlier episodes, our sweet pea on her way to find her son. And that was The Walking Dead: A New Frontier. Well, what can I say? That was a very underwhelming experience. where Season 2 had me baffled with its story decisions, and somewhat angry by the time I finished playing now that I think about it. This season just left me mentally checked out. I can't even say if it's better or worse than Season 2, as there's some things it did better, and others it did a lot worse. First, the good. I really like what they did with Clementine, showing how she's grown and become a highly capable survivor. I also liked Javi, though he ends up more underdeveloped than I expected. His characterization stays consistent, which is more than I can say for almost everyone else, at least. I relate to his struggle pre-End of the World, where he's treated like a fuck-up despite his efforts to be better. The story itself also felt more focused, with fewer random swerves like in Season 2, with Kenny's return or the random Russian confrontation. Also, I like the upgrade the visuals got, though some characters look a little too shiny, and, well, I guess that's all I got. As for the downsides, while the story is focused, the pacing feels off. Somehow both too fast and like nothing's happening at the same time. Part of it is because the entire story takes place over just a few days, and mostly in Richmond. So even though we're constantly moving from one revelation to another, like discovering David's alive, meeting the city leaders, getting kicked out, and exposing Joan, it still feels stagnant since we're mostly stuck in one location. The side characters barely get fleshed out compared to past seasons. You talk to Francine and Conrad once before she's killed, and Conrad doesn't last much longer if you decide to kill him. Eleanor and Tripp are a little better, but they're so out of focus that it's hard to care when Tripp dies, or Eleanor gets angry about Richmond falling apart. And the New Frontier as villains? They're just the generic raiding faction we've seen dozens of times in the Walking Dead universe. Nothing about how the New Frontier functions as a group really makes sense. The game can't decide if they're all bad, if only a few are corrupt because of Joan, or if they're in decline because she twisted their mission. From what I know of early promotional material, they were originally supposed to be a slaver group, which would make the brand they use far more fitting as a way to mark their slaves, and not some kind of test of loyalty. I wish they had stuck with that. They would have felt like a considerable threat, especially if they were the ones responsible for undoing Clem's Season 2 ending and kidnapping AJ. I'm not sure if David was meant to lead that version of the New Frontier, but once they became a vague military faction, I get the feeling the writers worried David would come across as too one-dimensionally evil, or too similar to Shane or Negan and the Saviors. So they added other faction leaders, made him oblivious to the darker things his men were doing, and gave him just enough layers to explain why he is the way he is. I've already covered this, but David's need to be a soldier, and his strained relationship with Cade end up muddling the big climax between him and Javi. It stops being about Javi growing and stepping up to protect his family, and instead feels like he's getting dragged into taking sides in Kate and David's crumbling marriage. That's why, by the time I reached the final choices, I didn't care about who was right. I just wanted it to end. It's technically a weaker rehash of the Kenny versus Jane fight from last season, but at least that I had the option to walk away. While you can technically end up with just Javi and Gabe in one ending, I would have preferred something more straightforward. Javi standing up for himself, putting both Kate and David in their place, and leaving them to sort out their marriage while he, Gabe, and Clem save Richmond. Kate and David either disappear or die, while Javi gives a speech about the importance of family, and how those two forgot that, or something. To sum up my thoughts, The New Frontier, despite its initial promise, fails to do anything truly interesting, or halt the decline of Telltale's The Walking Dead series. The season felt like it was too afraid to take risks with its characters, and so it ends up feeling like boring filler. I get that not everyone from Season 1 stayed on for later seasons, but it really makes the first season feel like lightning in a bottle. Honestly, I'm not so sure the series will stick the landing and deliver a satisfying finale in the final season, but I'll find out for myself eventually. And that's the video. Thanks for watching, folks. Special thanks to my Tier 2 channel members and patrons, with their names on screen right now. And special thanks to my Tier 3 channel members and patrons, including Alfred Correa, Augie Doggy, Blind and Sport Flow, Chicken D Samurai, Miles Garrett, Skillfuse, and Reckless Nerd. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can do it as low as $3 a month, which will get you early access to videos, and occasionally uncut videos when YouTube forces me to censor stuff, with the higher tiers getting your name in the credits or a verbal shoutout. I'm working on doing exclusive videos as well, trying out some different video ideas that don't necessarily gel with my usual content, but would be a great way to test new things and talk about games that won't work for my longer format. I'm going to keep today's outro short, as the back-to-back work on Mafia 3 and A New Frontier did a number on me. I'm still deciding on what I'm doing for November, but as always, keep an eye out for posts on my community tab. Also, I've started working on Red Dead Redemption 2, which after the crushing work on Final Fantasy VII, I'm doing my best to play the game when I can and hopefully have the video for it done by the end of the year. Fingers crossed I can pull it off. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and comment down below on what you thought about A New Frontier, or The Walking Dead in general. Are any of those spin-off shows any good? Are they even still going on? And if you're new to my channel, I'd love it if you subscribed. I'm a little over 20k away from 100,000 subscribers, and it would be awesome to get that silver play button by the end of the year. I'm FuzzySlippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.